one of my very favourite Beatle tracks. It comes from the LP Abbey Road. It was written and sung by the very talented musician who's in the studio now, George Harrison. George, I'd like to talk to you about the Beatles and the forthcoming LP, but first about yourself. When did you first start writing songs?
First song I ever wrote was in Bournemouth about, must have been around 1963. It was after our first success, and we were doing weekly shows in holiday resorts. So we were in Bournemouth and I was feeling sick. In fact, I was in bed sick and the doctor was giving me some tonic. And I just thought, I'll see if I can write a song. So I wrote one, and it was an awful song, and it was called Don't Bother Me, which I suppose is how I felt at the time.
Did you find it very hard at first to get ideas and think of songs? And
the main difficulty was really because of Paul and John having written so many good songs that
you automatically compared with them, I suppose.
Well, automatically, it was difficult for me to write some sort of crummy song and expect the Beatles to record it, already having such fine material. And that was the most difficult thing. And also to do a song with the Beatles, it was always a matter of trying to do the song that you thought they'd understand quickest, or the song you could get onto the tape the quickest, so not necessarily the song you thought was the best. The last 2 years has really been good experience for me because I've been doing more producing. And in a way that's nice, because if I'm a part of the band recording, if I'm playing guitar, then you think so much just about that one part, whereas if you're producing, you can tend to withdraw from that situation and see it from as a whole. You can see like the different parts that make up the record. And so it's much nicer in a way to produce.
which was the first one that you produced?
The first thing I did on my own, I think, was Jackie Lomax single and album, which I did the album in Hollywood, partly in Hollywood.
How many Jackie Lomax records have there been today?
3 singles.
Yeah.
First one was Sanuk Si, which was a song I wrote in Rishikesh in India. Second one was a song Jackie wrote, but I didn't produce that one. It was called New Day. And the third one is his new one now, called How the Web is Woven, Dave Most, Clive Westlake's song.
It's a very beautiful song indeed, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very like a lot of other songs. It's like,
well, I commented that
Matt Monroe, walk away, walk away.
I thought
Don't fool me, Dave, I know. And the carnival is over. We know where you nick 'em from, Dave. I mean, with most of those sort of songs that you think, that's a catchy song, it's because you've heard it so many times before, and it's just a matter of different words or slightly different. I mean, there's only certain notes in a scale, and if you use a basic sort of chord pattern, then it's very easy to get a similar sort of melody. And in a way that maybe that's what people like. I think people just tend to like those tunes they can just hear once or twice and go off to work whistling.
How did you get to work with Billy Preston?
Billy, we met Billy years ago when he was over with Little Richard. He was, at that time, he was just an organist in the church, gospel. And Little Richard, if you remember the history of Richard, where he gave up rock and roll and his aeroplane was on fire and all those sorts of things. But every time he went home, and I think must have spent all of his money, he decided to come back on tour again. So he brought Billy Preston. He was supposed to be coming to sing gospel songs, and they started the tour in England, sang one gospel song. There was all the rockers shouting, "Lucille, rip it up," and so Richard did that. It was the only way he could get by, really, because they didn't want to know about the gospel. So Billy, at that time, was about 15, straight out of church, and he never knew what hit him, you know, all these people jumping about, screaming. And we met him, worked with him in Hamburg for a long time, then sort of lost touch with him until about 2 years ago, I saw him in the Ray Charles show. I thought, I'm sure I know that fella there. I didn't catch the name, when he was announced. But then I just realized it was Billy, but he was Big Billy now, because before he was just very tiny. He was probably only about 4'3". And he came into Apple. I don't know, just the sort of vibration of Where's Billy Preston went out, and suddenly he walked into the office on the day we were doing Get Back, and we set up an electric piano for him, and he joined in straight away, and he's been there ever since. Really lovely fella, very, very good musician. It's very strange, this pop business, because his album was, there's a title on the album called Everything's All Right, and when we had it in the form of an album, everybody's saying, you should put that one out, that's a single, it's a smash straight away, just put some brass on it and put it out. So we put some brass on it and put it out, and it's went and it sold out 2 copies. So you shouldn't always go on your friend's advice.
Well, what about the latest one?
Well, the latest one is really, I didn't see it as a sort of smash hit, but it's a really great foot tapper. It's one of those, it's a dance sort of record. And in a way, Billy had a bit of a problem in America with, that's the way God planned it, because lots of the coloured stations, R&B stations, they wouldn't play, because they were saying, oh, he's copying out, he's going with the whiteys and all that sort of thing, so in a way it hurt Billy. He wanted to have a record that, even if it wasn't a hit, that the R&B stations would dig, so we'll put that one out.
Mm-hmm. And how's it been received in America?
So far it's doing very well. Of course, in America you can sell very well and sort of just make it into the 100, but there's so many people there, the sales figures are much more. All that I've got.
Let's get around to Doris Troy, because Doris, I can remember singing backing vocals for people like Dusty Springfield and goodness knows who else, and making records of her own years ago.
Yeah, the soul classic, Just One Look.
Yeah.
That's what somebody said in the paper, and I'll buy that. But I first met Doris on this Billy Preston session, because Madeline, who's, if you need backing voices, you get in touch with Madeline, and she brings along a few girls.
Yeah.
And Madeline brought Doris one day. Doris had come over to England with a few demo tapes, because she decided she wanted to live in England and try and do it from here, like, I suppose the sort of thing Jimi Hendrix did. And she came on a session, and she's been there ever since. So we did her single, which is Ain't That Cute, which we wrote in the studio, actually. This is good exercise, because talking about writing songs earlier, I wouldn't really go into a studio without a song, in the early days. I wouldn't consider going in there and just making it up on the spot, which is what we did with Ain't That Cute. We didn't have a song at that time, so we made it up, and I just pinched the chords from Delta Lady, and and away I went. And we wrote that. It's very nice, with Pete Frampton playing guitar.
Yeah.
And very interested now in forming a sort of Apple band, which would be like a permanent backing band for Apple artists, and also for them to record their own songs, their own records. But then it's very difficult just to buy a band, that is, just to put them on a retainer. In a way, it's got to be worked so they can keep earning money and slowly come together. But we use so many musicians lately that there's always like a lead guitarist in town, or there's always a trumpeter there, or a bass player here. On the Doris Troy album, Billy Preston, we've been using all sorts of people. Whoever comes to town, comes and plays on the sessions. We had Temptations rhythm section, bass player, guitarist, and drummer, which is really nice. Also Sam and Dave's, I think it was his drummer and his saxophonist playing bass, played on a couple of Billy Prestons. And there's plenty of nice people, really just want to play. like Pete Frampton played on this one, Doris's single. And it's very enjoyable, you know, because musicians are very nice, very easy people to get on with. You know, there's a mutual thing. There's a point where you don't have really to talk much about what the weather's like, because if you're playing together, then it sort of transcends that. There's a mutual sort of understanding.
Some folks want to remake wheels.
When are these albums coming out, the Doris Troy?
I don't know, really. I was hoping to see some sort of movement on Ain't That Cute and then try and work from there. Because it's pointless just putting out an album that you spend so much time working on, then just put it out and it get maybe a play on what's new, and that's it. It's just gone. It's very difficult, you know. It's very frustrating in a way when you spend so much time writing and producing and getting all these things together, and then it just gets lost. Maybe it's because you're too close to it, you know. It's a very sort of personal thing in the end when you've finished an album and made the sleeve and all that sort of thing.
George, what would you say has influenced you most musically?
Oh, couldn't just put my finger on sort of one thing. Everything, really. Anything you listen to, anything that, even if you don't listen to it, things that just sort of come into your ears from outside. You know, you hear a bit of this, a bit of that. Mainly music that I enjoy most of all myself. Then I play lots of music at home all the time, so I suppose I'm influenced indirectly by that.
What do you play at home?
I play mainly Indian music and Bob Dylan and the band. I do play, I like to keep up with all the people I know of and new things. In fact, I've got an incredible collection of records. It's very difficult in a way to be able to hear what's going on all the time and not fill up the house with sort of rubbish. In the thing like Hare Krishna mantra, you know, that's really a spiritual song. The purpose is to give people a bit of relief from the normal pressures, but you don't have to understand that sort of music or lyric, because it's in the actual sound that it produces has certain magic.
So you don't have to know all the ins and outs of the religion to be able to appreciate the rest.
It's like anything, like singing Hallelujah, Hallelujah. If you really sung that for an hour, then you'd feel good. And I'd like to get more into that sort of music that you can benefit from on all different levels, like physically and mentally, and that actually does you some good rather than just sort of bebop and having a nice time.
Well, it's obviously through your interest in Indian music that you became associated with the Radha Krishna temple.
Yeah. Also with the experience of that meditation. I suppose all the listeners remember that. And having experienced that, I could understand really what this Krishna movement was about. And it's also a much more appealing path to God, that is to sing and dance and eat, which is really what the thing is all about, just to eat nice food and to dance a lot and sing a lot. And they sing the name of God, which is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. You know, you've all heard that one. Also, the new record now, I think, is so much nicer.
What's the meaning of the new one?
Govinda is also the name of Krishna, and Krishna is the name of God, because God is unlimited, and so he can have as many names, you know, like Allah. All those names are all God, and it's the same God, all your listeners. It's not like we haven't got a different one. It's the same one.
What sort of immediate plans are there, George, for anything new? We've spoken a bit about the Doris Troy album, but is there anything else?
All the time, it doesn't stop. You know, there's, as far as the Beatles go, we've got the Let It Be album, which should be out in about 3 or 4 weeks. It's been held up really because the best way to do it was to put out the film. We're trying to put the film out in about 40 different cities throughout the world all at once, rather than sort of put on a premiere in New York and then let the critics say, oh, well, we think it's this and we think it's that.
And what's the Beatle film going to be about?
The Beatle film is just pure documentary of us slogging and working.
On Let It Be?
Yeah, on the album. And really, we were thinking of how to do a TV show, but we realized it was much easier just to make it into a film. You know, it was a 16mm film, but it was so nice in a way well, it was very informative. It's not really nice for me. I can't stand seeing it. But for other people who don't know what we're really about, who like to go in and see our warts, then it's very good.
The hold-up of the album is because we want this film to go out simultaneously.
Then there's also, Ringo's just completed a great album. I think it's called, what's it called, Ringo?
Ringo Sings Ringo?
No, it was going to be called Ringo Stardust, but it's not. Sentimental Journey, it's called. And it's all the songs that Elsie and Harry and his uncle and aunties, that's his father and mother, they used to all sing and have parties all the time. So he sings all these old songs with the sort of old arrangements. He doesn't do the sort of modern arrangement. Yeah. And it's really a nice album. Then John's doing an album, a Plastic Ono album. I think he's going to do that with Phil Spector. And I think Paul's doing an album which is, I should imagine, like, if you remember Eddie Cochran did a couple of tracks like Come On Everybody, where he played bass, drums, guitar and sang. So Paul's doing this sort of thing where he's going to play all the instruments himself, which is nice.
Because he couldn't possibly do that in the Beatles. You know, if it was a Beatle album, automatically Paul gets stuck on bass, Ringo gets on drums.
So in a way, it's a great relief for us all to be able to work separately at the same time. And so maybe if I get a chance, I'd like to do an album as well, just to get rid of a lot of songs. So maybe I'll
just
do
a George album.
A George album. And so I'll try and get that together sometime during this summer. And I expect by that time we should be ready to do a new Beatle album.
Well, that's all very, very lovely, in fact. But can we do a little bit just more specifically on what's going to be on Let It Be? Is it all finished?
Yeah, well, that was done. Originally, we were rehearsing. We were rehearsing the songs that we were planning to do in some big TV spectacular or something. We had a vague idea of doing a TV show.
But we really didn't know the formula of how to do it, because we didn't really want to do... Obviously, we didn't want to do a magical mystery tour, having already been on that trip. And we didn't want to do sort of the Tom Jones spectacular. And we're always trying to be, to do something slightly different. And we were down in Apple rehearsing.
And we decided to film it on 16mm to maybe use as a documentary. And the record happened to be the rehearsal of the record, and the film happened to be, rather than a TV show, it happened to be the film of us making the record. So it's very rough in a way. You know, it's nice because, again, you can see our warts. You can hear us talking, you can hear us playing out of tune, and you can hear us coughing and all those things. It's the complete opposite to the sort of clinical approach that we've normally had. You know, studio recording, everything, the balance, everything's just right, and, you know, the silence in between each track. This is really not like that. But there's nice songs, really good songs on it. Let It Be, of course, and Don't Let Me Down. I think they're the two that you people will have heard of.
Are there any more George Harrison somethings, or...?
There's, no, there's no somethings.
These songs that we did were done before something, but they're very...
There's one song which is a 12-bar, because I've never written a 12-bar before, and that's called For You Blue, and it's just a very simple foot-tapping 12-bar.
The other one is a very strange song, which I wrote the night before it was in the film. You see, we were, at this time, we were at Twickenham, and I wrote this song. It took 5 minutes just from an idea I had. I went into the studio and sang it to Ringo, and they happened to film it. And that film sequence was quite nice, you see, so they wanted to keep that sequence in the film, but I hadn't really recorded it in Apple with the rest of the song, so we had to go in the studio and re-record it.
Also, we put on Across the Universe, which was a song on the album for the charity album.
It came out for Wildlife, and that really got lost. It's been around for about 3 years now. 1967, I think we did that.
It's a really nice song of John's.
So we put that on just because it's awful having things in the cupboard, you know.
What else have John and Paul done for this particular album that might be worth a listen?
There's a great song of John's called Dig a Pony, and it's, you know, John type lyrics. You can syndicate any boat you row and various other things like that. There's a nice song of Paul's which is one of those that probably hundreds of people will record. Somebody's going to have a hit with it. It's called The Long and Winding Road. It's like one of those ballad standard sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole album, you see, is very spontaneous because all we were doing was rehearsing. So in between different numbers, we suddenly go into Fats Domino tunes, or, you know, old Rock Around the Clock or type things, you know, whatever, however we felt at the time. So there's little bits and pieces, like there's a song called Can You Dig It, which is just really made up on the spot, with John shouting, John being John, again shouting about the various things. And it's really, you just have to listen to it and make up your own mind. But I think it's very nice. It's a good change, you know, after all those Sgt. Peppers.
It's totally different, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. In fact, some people maybe put off a first hearing. It sounds maybe...
My attitude when we decided to use it as an album was that people may think we're not trying, you know, because it's really like a demo record. But on the other hand, it's worth so much more than those other records because you can actually get to know us a bit more. You know, it's a bit more human than the average studio recording.
It's the end of the Beatles, like maybe how people imagine the Beatles. The Beatles have never really been what people thought they were anyway. So in a way, it's the end of the Beatles like that, but it's not really the end of the Beatles. The Beatles are going to go on to they die, you know. I mean, we can't get away from being the Beatles. I can see this year us all doing a separate album each, and by that time people will probably think there's no chance at all of there ever being Beatles again, and then suddenly there'll be Beatles again. I think it's just a good thing for us all. It's like if you work together for a long time, it's nice to go away from each other for a while, because then you can appreciate what it's like being together. I think during this year, it's really a good year. Everything really feels very good. The vibrations are good. Lennon's had his haircut. And everything's swinging, you know. So it's really going to be good. And maybe by the end of the year, everybody will be feeling so good that we'll do some other album, you know, Beatle album. I certainly, you know, don't want to see the end of the Beatles. And I know I'll do anything, you know, whatever Paul, John, Ringo would like to do, you know, I'll do it.
As long as we can all be free to be individuals at the same time. You know, but there was a lot of sort of tension for a while because, you know, if you grow up together, then you tend to forget about the growth of each other, you know.
So long as you can all do your own individual things, you have no objection to being a Beatle indefinitely?
No. I think, you know, that's just part of our life, you know, is to be Beatles. And I'll play that game, you know, as long as the people want us to.